You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
Hi, I'm Annie from the US.
And I'm Johanna from Austria, and you're listening to your favorite international podcast. The podcast hosted by two women who never met in real life, but who have one shared obsession: exploring the very dark corners of history.
If you've been with us for years, welcome back. And if you're new here, welcome. Our show is part true crime, part history lesson, part long-distance friendship, and somehow it all works. We promise detailed research, not so terrible segues, and at least one moment per episode where you're going to think, who are these people? And how is this real life? Before we start, I do want to apologize. If I sound funny today, shout out to those compiling the bingo card. I am recovering from a really nasty upper respiratory situation. And also, I have gale force winds outside. So, yeah.
Your respiratory situation. Sorry, Jem is slurping.
You have jam slurping next to you, and I'm slurping on a cough drop on the other end. You're in like some sort of special podcaster hell right now.
Yeah, we are. Your respiratory situation is also the reason why last week there was no Cinema Macabre, so our patrons already know about that, which is a not so terrible segue to welcome our newest patron members. And they are Sarah Austin, Lonise, and Esther Rose. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much.
You are helping us keep the lights on and the research rabbit holes deep.
That's right.
Definitely.
Yeah. And if you want to know more about all of the different ways to support the show and about our Patreon tiers, please listen until the end, because that's when we'll tell you everything you need to know about that. Now it is time to jump right into today's case, and this one has it all. An American doctor in London, a vanished wife, and a discovery that made headlines around the world. This is the case of not H.H. Holmes, Crippen, Dr. Hawley Harvey Crippen, to be exact.
I'm thrilled. You know why? Because we rarely talk about the Edwardian era, really. Yeah, we covered Oceana Sneed and Stanford White and Dorothy Arnold. And now that I think about it, I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot, and we probably talk about the Edwardian era.
I think we do talk about it. Like, objectively speaking.
All right, so we are traveling back to London in the early 20th century. If you could walk through the city back then, it would feel both familiar but also completely foreign, because you'd still see horse-drawn cabs and piles of coal outside doorways. But now and then, a car would kind of swoosh past. Well, not swoosh, they were pretty slow, but you know what I mean. And then people would stop and stare, or they would swear and, shake their fists, depending on how close the car came to them. And the streets were noisy and crowded and full of smells like soot and wet wool and roasted chestnuts. Maybe a bit of sewage if you were near the river. And people thought this was the height of progress. What a time to be alive! The Edwardian era, that's what this time period is called. Technically, it only lasted from 1901 to 1910, which is the years when King Edward VII ruled after his mother, Queen Victoria. But most people basically stretch the Edwardian era up until the beginning of First World War, because, the feeling of it lingered a few years longer than it actually lasted. It was a short little moment in history wedged between two very different worlds, the buttoned-up Victorians and the chaos and horror that was about to come. Edward VII, who this decade is named after, quite interesting fella. He loved parties and gambling and rich food, and he also loved women who were not his wife. And if you've been with us for a while, you might remember we already mentioned him in our episode about architect Stanford White. Yes, the same Stanford White with the famous red velvet swing. And you might also remember that Edward had his own famous, scandalous furniture, which was a custom-made sex chair designed to accommodate, let's say, his enthusiastic approach to multitasking. Because apparently it allowed him to entertain 2 guests at once without too much strain. I think that tells you everything you need to know about the man.
Yeah, I still think one of my favorite Fresh Hell moments has been when people in the Facebook group, we have a Facebook album for every one of our episodes that we do. And people will, comment there or add their own thoughts, whatever. And in this particular episode, everybody started to make a copy of the sex chair, and then they started to draw stick figures of like different colors for different people to sort of work out how the chair was supposed to be used, adding their thoughts as comments throughout, and it's chef's kiss of a moment.
I love it. Yeah. And funnily enough, also we mentioned the sex chair in our promo because it's just such an iconic Fresh Hell moment, I think.
It would be in the Fresh Hell calendar. We should do a Fresh Hell calendar, actually. That would be really fun. And we could do all the proceeds to that dog rescue that you're involved with.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. But back to the sex chair. Just a few weeks ago, somebody messaged me us on Instagram, and he was like, I just started listening to you, but excuse me, could you just tell me where's the episode with the sex chair? I'm like, I'm so sorry, there is no episode with the sex chair.
I just came here for the sex chair.
We talk about the sex chair. Yeah.
You have to, what are we going to do? We're all adults here. We can talk about it. This isn't a mature podcast for a mature audience. We told you right in the beginning.
So under Queen Victoria, the country had preached restraint and propriety. Under Edward, everyone pretended to keep those same values while they were secretly indulging in excess whenever possible. It was all about being discreet, though. And on the surface, life looked lovely if you were wealthy. I mean, it's always like that, right? Mm-hmm. There were the big houses and the enormous heads that killed almost all bird populations everywhere. And endless social events, the garden parties, the dinners, the balls. Even if you weren't rich, you were supposed to act like you were. Respectability was everything. You needed the right clothes, the right manners, ideally at least one servant, even if you could barely afford to pay them. It was all about the appearances. As long as everything looked proper from the outside, nobody needed to know what was actually going on inside your house. For the middle class, it was a time of trying to climb the social ladder. You had to keep up, or at least pretend you were keeping up. Does that sound familiar a little bit? Because I have the feeling that we are at a similar stage again, where appearance is everything. I mean, people rent designer handbags and private jet mock-ups to just take photos and videos that they can post online.
Yeah. I was going to say back then, people really went into debt to try to keep up with the neighbors, but we still do, don't we? Although now it's more like trying to keep up with strangers on the internet. Everybody still wants to look like they're living their best life, even if it means quietly panicking about how to pay for it later. I feel like this was never more true in my life than when I was planning my first wedding. Like the late 90s and early 2000s, and I'm sure before that and after that, in the United States specifically, there was like rings were huge and weddings were huge. And like, it was wild to me that people would go into debt to buy a diamond ring for somebody.
Annie, but I really think you're way too little online because it got so much worse.
Is it worse?
It got so much. Now people are engagement ring shaming online if it's too small.
Oh, gross.
They have like 5 different wedding reception dresses.
Oh, no. Yeah, okay.
Kids' birthday parties and like gender reveal parties and whatever are are like the size and the kind of logistics of weddings, of how weddings used to be. Not as many guests, but it's so elaborate and everything has to be just like picture perfect.
But is that just like influencers, or is everybody trying to do that? I'm probably just too old.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people think that this is real life now, what they see on with the influencers, and try to copy that. And everybody's just trying to keep up, and that's
sad.
Insanity. And I really think we're just all being brainwashed.
Well, that's been the case for forever, hasn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, appearances were really important.
Yeah. Maybe it's always been like this, and it's just like a snowball and gets worse and worse and worse. Because back then, there was this constant pressure to present yourself well, to seem respectable, to be calm all the time, to be in control. Even if your marriage was miserable and your finances were a mess, as long as nobody knew and you were calm about it, who cares? The working class, on the other hand, didn't have much time for appearances. They were, as always, busy surviving. Most people in London lived in overcrowded housing, with coal dust on every surface, and a few pennies a week made the difference between eating and not eating.
But everyone, no matter their class, loved entertainment. The city's music halls were packed every night. These places were full of smoke, they were loud, and just a little bit scandalous. Variety acts, comedy dancing, and songs that hinted at things polite society pretended not to understand. It was the closest most people got to real glamour. The stars of those stages were treated like celebrities. Their photos were in the papers. There was always gossip about their love lives, their costumes, and every other detail of their lives. People couldn't get enough. Meanwhile, technology was changing faster than anyone could quite believe. Electricity was still new and not entirely to be trusted. Some people actually thought it might make you sick if you sat too close to a light bulb. That's wild, isn't it? Although, we say that now about microwaves, don't we?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's wild to me. Telephones were appearing in businesses. Cars were terrifying and exciting in equal measure. And the wireless, the fact that you could now send messages through the air, it sounded like actual magic. For the first time, the world felt connected in a completely new way. But for all that talk about progress and modernity, the Edwardians were still conservative, almost as much as the Victorians. There were strict rules about behavior, gender, class. Men were supposed to be dignified providers. Women were supposed to be pretty, polite, and patient. You didn't talk about money, sex, or death in public. You didn't air your problems, and if something went wrong, you just smiled and carried on. That's really what defines this era, a constant balancing act between progress and keeping the past alive. And we know, it's easy to romanticize this time period. You know, the beautiful clothes, the architecture, the manners. But as always, there is just as much to criticize. Scientific breakthroughs right next to superstition. Lavish wealth next to extreme poverty. People talking proudly about civilization and empire while ignoring the realities that kept it all going. Still, it must have felt exciting to live back then with all of these new inventions. Probably not that different than today, right? I mean...
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's wild. And, you know, things like telephones and electricity became wildly available. It's kind of like the internet for us, isn't it? Smartphones. Like, wow, I miss a time before smartphones. They weren't there yet. They were excited about the fact that you could sit in a theater, watch a woman in feathers singing about love, and then step outside into the smell of gas, petrol, and horse manure and feel like you were living in the future. That is the Edwardian world, bright and brittle at the same time, polite on the surface but really messy underneath, a world where everyone's playing their part, trying to hold on to the illusion that everything's fine. This is fine. Everything is fine. And this is kind of important for our story.
Just a quick side note. I don't remember in which episode we talked about it, but this was also a time, this time the Edwardian era, but also like 100 years before that, during the industrialization, was kind of when we see rises in depression and suicide because people started to feel burned out because of all the constant rapid changes in work environment, in technologies that arrived. Everything kind of just was so fast all of a sudden.
Overwhelming.
And I think we're at this point again. So again, this is this kind of thing of it's just cycle after cycle of the same thing, just looking a little bit different.
That's a really
and I think
important
that's
point.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, now it's time to tell you all about the main characters in this case. So let's start with Dr. Crippen himself. Hawley Harvey Crippen, and he was born on 11th of September 1862 in Coldwater, Michigan, which was at the time a newly established and rather quiet Midwestern town. Located in Branch County near the southern border with Indiana, Coldwater had seen the first settlers in 1830, had been incorporated as a village in 1837, and then incorporated as a city in 1861, so just 1 year before Crippen's birth. Its population at the time was roughly around 3,000 people, while today it has a population of more or less 50,000. Back then it was mostly farmers, shopkeepers, small manufacturers. The railroad had arrived a few years earlier, connecting the town to Detroit and Chicago, which meant that even this quiet corner of the Midwest was now, in a way, connected to the wider world. Coldwater was one of those tidy, carefully planned towns. The main street was lined with brick storefronts, families went to church on Sundays, children attended school, and neighbors kept track of one another's businesses with equal parts concern and curiosity. It was the kind of place that produced reliable citizens. Education was a point of pride in Coldwater. The town had one of Michigan's earliest public high schools, and by the 1870s, literacy rates were high. It wasn't unusual for middle-class children to go on to college or professional training, particularly sons expected to make something of themselves. And the Crippen family was no exception. Hawley's father, Myron Augustus Crippen, worked as a dry goods merchant, and his mother, Andress Skinner Crippen, managed the home. Hawley was their only surviving child, and the family wasn't wealthy, but they were comfortable, and education for their son was a priority. By all accounts, young Hawley was intelligent and mild-mannered, the sort of boy teachers liked and classmates forgot about immediately. He was not rebellious or particularly outgoing. He simply did what was expected of him. And in that sense, he was perfectly ordinary. After finishing school, Crippen studied at the Cleveland Homeopathic Medical College, one of several institutions that taught an alternative form of medicine popular in the 19th century. Homeopathy was founded on the idea that like cures like, and that highly diluted substances could treat the symptoms they would cause in larger doses. And by Victorian standards, this was cutting-edge science.
Homeopathy was created in the late 18th century by a German physician named Samuel Hahnemann. He wasn't a quack in the beginning. He was actually reacting against the truly awful medical practices of that time. We talked about it before. In the 1700s, if you were sick, your doctor might bleed you, purge you, or give you mercury, which often killed you faster than the disease could. Hahnemann wanted something gentler. His big idea came from a simple experiment. After taking cinchona bark, the source of quinine, which is used to treat malaria, he noticed that it gave him malaria-like symptoms. From this, he decided that, quote, like cures like. In other words, a substance that causes symptoms in a healthy person could, in extremely small doses, cure those same symptoms in a sick one. So far, not too out there, but Hahnemann took it a step further. He believed that diluting a remedy didn't make it weaker. Nope, it actually made it stronger. The process was called succussion, shaking and diluting the original ingredient sometimes hundreds or thousands of times until there was barely a molecule left. According to Hahnemann, what remained was, quote, the spirit or memory of the substance, which would somehow encourage the body to heal itself. Back then, this was kind of revolutionary. Homeopathy offered a humane alternative to leeches, poisons, and saws. It didn't hurt, it didn't burn, and people often got better simply because their bodies were allowed to just recover naturally without anyone trying to bleed them or make them vomit nonstop. The placebo effect did the rest. By the mid-19th century, homeopathy had spread across Europe and America. It appealed especially to the middle class, who could afford to pay for treatment but didn't want the brutal methods of traditional medicine. It was clean, gentle, and scientific sounding, so basically everything respectable that people liked. I mean, it starts with home, right?
Did you just say it starts with home or it starts with hoe?
I said it starts with home. Home.
Okay.
Because I was thinking, like anything good, it starts with hoe. No, it starts with home because we talked so much in the Victorian episodes about how the home was like a secure and safe as houses, you know, that whole thing. And so
it's true, yeah.
I think the fact that home is right in the beginning there.
I think that's a good point, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Probably didn't hurt. So
there's no place like home.
There's no place like home. In the United States, homeopathic medical schools began opening up everywhere. Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, Cleveland. They taught anatomy, physiology, and chemistry alongside Hahnemann's principles, which gave the whole system an air of legitimacy. Graduates called themselves doctor, and some even became prominent in local communities. By the time Crippen studied at the Cleveland Homeopathic Medical School in the early 1880s, homeopathy was at its peak. There were over 20 homeopathic medical schools and more than 100 homeopathic hospitals in the United States alone. These institutions produced practitioners who were trained and respectable. But by the end of the 19th century, homeopathy was starting to fall out of favor within scientific circles. Advances in bacteriology, antiseptics, and pharmacology made real medicine safer and more effective. Doctors like Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch were proving that diseases were caused by germs, not imbalances. And suddenly, the old diluted tinctures seemed quaint. Still, the public trusted homeopaths, especially in the United States and in Britain, where they often ran elegant private practices catering to nervous upper-class patients. In London, the royal family even had its own homeopathic physician, a fact that helped the practice keep a veneer of respectability well into the 20th century.
It's interesting. So homeopathy is mostly faded into niche status in places like the US or the UK, if I understand it correctly. It never really went away in Austria, Germany, or Switzerland. In fact, it's still widely used and somewhat respected here. You can buy homeopathic remedies in any pharmacy, so any apotheke, and there are even many general practicing doctors, like real doctors, who will prescribe them alongside conventional medicine.
You know what it reminds me of a little bit is when we did the Lizzie Halliday episode, he was doing, was it Paul Halliday that had remember he was making tinctures. He was like, he had a whole business and then he sold it because this was so popular at that time. Everybody was making tinctures of things.
Yeah. Anyway, when Crippen graduated around 1884, earning the right to call himself now the doctor, it's important to note that his training was very different from a traditional physician. He specialized briefly in ear and eye medicine. He was studying in New York for a time and then later worked as a homeopathic practitioner and medicine dispenser. Colleagues described him as conscientious, neat, and very unassuming. He seems to have had a genuine interest, though, in helping people. In 1887, Crippen married Charlotte Jane Bell, a young woman from Brooklyn. And it was, by all accounts, a very conventional marriage. Respectable, which is the number one important thing in the era, remember?
Mm-hmm.
Not especially passionate and focused on building a stable life. And I think that's perfectly fine. That's lovely. The couple had one son, Hawley Otto Crippen, born in 1889. But tragedy struck just 3 years later in 1892 when Charlotte died suddenly of a stroke, and she was only 27 at the time.
So awful.
So awful.
You know, Charlotte Bell is the name that I had chosen. My late husband's last name was Bell, And when I thought I would still have children, my girl name was Charlotte.
I think it's such a lovely name. And it has a very special ring to it. Charlotte Belle.
I loved it. I thought Charlie for short would be so cute.
I mean, you can make everything with that name.
I love it. It's my sister-in-law's middle name. So yeah, that was my baby name that I never got to use. One of them.
So now Hawley Crippen was left a widower at 29 with a toddler to care for. And there's little record of how he coped with that loss. He seems to have thrown himself into work, which is a pattern that would continue throughout his life whenever things went a little bit south. But raising a child alone in the 1890s was difficult and especially unusual for a man, I think.
Yeah.
And so the most common solution was found, and young Otto was sent to live with his grandparents in Michigan while Crippen pursued better employment opportunities. It is very unclear whether he planned to send for his son later. In any case, the two would never live together again. So we pretty much say goodbye to Otto here. Records show he stayed in Michigan for the rest of his life. He married a woman named Grace in the 1920s. He worked steadily, possibly in business or clerical work. Reports vary about that kind of things. And he lived an entirely quiet, ordinary, respectable life. He died in 1967 in Michigan at the age of 77. He had no children, which means his death would mark the quiet end of the Crippen family line.
Now back to Crippen. His career path took him through several posts in the growing field of patent and homeopathic medicine. He wasn't a brilliant doctor or an ambitious researcher. We should imagine him more as a sort of employee who turned up on time, did what was asked, and didn't cause trouble. The reliability he had helped him find steady work, even if it never made him rich. By the mid-1890s, he was working for Munyon's Homeopathic Remedies, a company founded by American entrepreneur James Munyon. Munyon's was famous, or infamous, for its little bottles of cures for everything from headaches to heartbreak.
If it was just so easy, huh?
Yeah.
Heartbreak cure.
Just take this mix of opium, cocaine, and cannabis, and you are going to sleep so well. No shit, thanks. So if you listen to our episodes about P.T. Barnum, you might remember how the 19th century produced a very specific kind of marketing genius, right? Men who understood that people didn't just want facts, they wanted a good story. Barnum sold entertainment. James Munyon, Crippen's employer, sold cures. But the basic trick was the same. Sell people what they want to believe. Barnum promised wonders, mermaids, giants, miracles. And Munyon promised health in a bottle. Munyon's company, Munyon's Homeopathic Remedies, was everywhere in the 1890s. The ads were works of art. One of his most famous slogans was, "There is hope." This slogan was accompanied by a portrait of Munyon himself, raising his index finger upward. That's it. Simple, emotional, brilliant. He sold little vials of sugar pills and tinctures for every human condition you can imagine. Headache, indigestion, female trouble, and even nervous exhaustion, which basically covered everything from anxiety to a hangover. He was a born salesman. Like Barnum, Munyon didn't invent what he was selling. People already believed in homeopathy. Shit, are we in another archipelago situation?
Yeah, I'm so confused as well.
Homeopathy. Right? Have I been saying it two different ways the whole time?
I've been saying it in the incorrect way because I'm saying it in the more German way and you saying it in the correct English way, and I'm so confused.
How do you say
I just want to lie down.
I'm so sorry, this episode.
Make it stop.
Please, for the love of God. Munyon was a born salesman. Like Barnum, Munyon didn't invent what he was selling. People already believed in homeopathy, but he repackaged it for mass consumption. The man himself was larger than life. He called himself Professor Munyon, even though no university,
of course he did.
Of course, I hate him so much, had ever given him that title. He cultivated the image of a wise, fatherly healer and made millions doing it. At his peak, his remedies were sold in more than 20,000 pharmacies across the United States, Canada, and Europe, including, of course, London. And that is where Crippen came in. His job involved management and sales rather than direct patient care, which suited his personality. But it also meant that he moved often, following opportunities to new cities.
Around this time, so roughly in 1894, he met a young woman named Cora Turner. She was born on 1st of September 1872 in Brooklyn, New York, as one of at least 7 children. Depending on which newspaper you read in 1910, you'll see at least 3 different versions of her name. So some called her Cora Turner, others Corinne Henrietta Turner, which makes sense. And then there are some who insist that her real name was Kunigunde Makamotsky or Makamotsky with S or Z, whatever you like, and that she was the daughter of German-Polish immigrants. No one could quite agree on this person. And honestly, I think that tells you something about her already, because Cora seemed to reinvent herself whenever it suited her.
I mean, if her name was Kunigunde, that's rough.
Well, that's very old German.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's
Brunhilde, Kunigunde,
yeah.
Agen, Siegfried, that's all these kind of names.
I don't mind that one so much, but I don't know why Kunigunde.
I mean, nobody names the child Kunigunde anymore. Maybe it's going to have like a revival at some point.
Yeah, my grandma was Mildred Agnes, and she told my mom that if they named me Mildred or Agnes, she would haunt my mom because she hated the name so much. But I love those old names.
I love it too, and some of them are making a comeback. Like my paternal grandmother's name was Hermine.
Oh.
Not Hermione, Hermine. And I think it's a horrible name in German, but it's making a comeback somewhat, which is weird.
I'm for it.
So yeah, she grew up in a working class family, probably with very modest means, but very big ambitions. Like a lot of women in turn of the century in New York, she would have started working young. Maybe in a shop, maybe sewing, maybe even in a small theater company. And we don't know for sure, but what we do know is that by her early 20s, she had both talent and drive, 2 qualities that could get a woman out of poverty if she played the cards right. When she met Dr. Crippen in the early 1890s, she was in her early 20s, and he was, the quiet widower, not yet 30. He had this steady job, he was soft-spoken, he was polite. She was lively, social, determined to make something of herself, and opposites, as they say, attract. So they married shortly after they met, and almost immediately Cora began to style herself as something very grand, grander than a Mrs. Crippen. She chose the name Belle Elmore. It's a wonderfully theatrical alias that sounded half Southern Belle, half Parisian chanteuse. Belle, she wanted to be a performer, to sing, to act, to be seen. She had a strong voice and even stronger confidence, which is of course very important in the world of entertainment. By the mid-1890s, the couple moved to London, where Crippen had been sent by Munyons to help manage the company's European branch. For Cora, this must have felt like an adventure, a ticket to a bigger stage. London's music halls were thriving. They were packed with singers and dancers and comedians performing for crowds that wanted laughter and a little harmless scandal.
But before we get to that, it's worth pausing on where Crippen stood at this point in his life. He was educated, but not wealthy, qualified, but not quite in the way that counted in professional circles. In America, his credentials let him practice freely, but when he transferred to London, he discovered that his American diploma did not meet British medical licensing standards. In England, he couldn't legally call himself a doctor in the formal sense, at least not without retraining. That would become one of the quiet humiliations of his life. In London, he wasn't Dr. Crippen, physician, he was a homeopathic salesman. Still, London must have seemed exciting at first. It was the center of the world, the heart of the British Empire. It was also a city full of opportunities for his new wife, who had dreams far louder than his own. By the end of the 1890s, the Crippens had settled into their new life. Hawley in an office surrounded by bottles of diluted medicine, and Cora in a world of theater people, costumes, and champagne. The next chapter of his story, and hers, would play out there in a city that rewarded appearances and punished failure. And Belle Elmore fit right in. She wasn't the most gifted singer, but she made up for it with personality. She wore bold colors, big hats, and jewelry that sparkled under the lights. She loved being noticed, and she loved being admired. She performed at local venues and charity events, building up small but loyal circles of friends in the music hall community. And in case you wonder what kind of performances and entertainments Belle was a part of, we found a few examples for you about her. Here we go. This is from The Era, Saturday, October 27th, 1900, page 8. Under Amusements in Manchester, we have, quote, Tivoli Theatre of Varieties, Managing Director, Mr. Charles A. Wilkes, Manager, Mr. Arthur B. Wilkes. Miss Florrie Gallimore, as merry and engaging as ever, is here. George Beauchamp, a Manchester favorite, stirs up laughter in no half-hearted fashion. Charles Dean's songs go with much. Amy Russell is an excellent burlesque artist. Ryde and Beeman are smart acrobats. Effie Norton is a fine male impersonator. Belle Elmore dances and sings merrily. Sib and Sib are clever trapezists, and Percy Cahill gives a good turn. So that's quite the night of entertainment, isn't it?
Yeah, sounds fun.
It does sound fun. And then we found another one. This one is from The Era, Saturday, September 29th, 1900, page 9. This time we're in Bath, Amusements in Bath. Lyric Theatre of Varieties lists the managers. Mademoiselle Jenny Mills, with her variety company, is appearing here. The great attraction is Mademoiselle Mills with her serpentine dances, which for coloring and prettiness surpass anything previously seen here. Her turn is received with loud applause. Then we're going to tell you about the other less appealing things here. And then it says, Violet and Fritz in their unique act, Fun in the Kitchen, meet with approbation.
That sounds so great, all of it. Fun in the kitchen. Like, what is that?
Doesn't it? A talking comedienne is Violet London, I think is what that's supposed to be. Fred E. Dando is clever in his man-monkey act. Is he? The sisters Geraldine, a duettists, always go well. Frank Yap, comedian, meets with applause. Belle Elmore, a comely comedienne, and Frank Mundell, descriptive vocalist, also appear. End quote. What is a descriptive vocalist?
Maybe he's like maybe he's like a mix between a vocalist and a stand-up comedian, and he's kind of making it up as he goes. I have no idea. I don't know what any of these acts, like, okay, a serpentine dance.
Yeah, she's getting snaky with it.
Yeah, but then the unique act of Fun in the Kitchen.
It doesn't sound fun. Things in the kitchen.
You know what I think what it is, what I could imagine, they're like juggling with kitchen utensils, stuff you find in the kitchen, and doing stuff with that, probably.
Oh, yes, that's probably more likely. I was thinking more of who was the guy that used to smash watermelons?
What?
You remember the watermelon smasher guy?
No, I just know this woman who smashed it with her butt cheeks.
Oh, wow. That does sound
like
fancy.
That was a thing on the internet a couple of years ago.
I'm trying to work out if descriptive vocalist was at the beginning of ASMR. Did he just get up on stage and be like, hey, everybody, it's really dark and smoky in here. There's a guy in the front suit wearing a nice tux. I don't know. Tip your bar staff. Like, what's a descriptive vocalist? Who can say? Did anybody see Frank Mundell? Does anybody know? Is there a relative of his out there that can call us and tell us more about that act? Because I have questions. Her friends later described Belle as a warm, generous, and a little bit dramatic. I imagine her as the kind of woman who laughed a little too loud, told stories even louder. She adored entertaining guests at their home, inviting other performers and minor society figures for drinks and gossip. I think she was a good time girl. Like, I think she was a fun...
I think so too. Yeah.
Genuinely fun.
I think she was probably this kind of larger-than-life person you just kind of either love or hate, or love to hate.
That's right.
Yeah. Also, I think she probably liked being Belle Elmore, the singer, far more than being Mrs. Crippen, the quote-unquote doctor's wife. But also London wasn't as kind to her as she'd hoped. Competition in theatres was brutal, and Belle's singing career never really took off. She performed occasionally, but she never broke through to the big stages. Meanwhile, Hawley Crippen's life in London was the opposite. His work with Munyons was quiet and administrative, more about paperwork and distribution than about healing people. And his mild-mannered and quiet personality, which has served him well in Coldwater and Cleveland and also New York, made him seem dull in Belle's social circles. We can all picture it. Like, he's surrounded at home by a bunch of theater people.
Mm-hmm.
And he's this kind of tiny guy with tiny glasses and tiny mustache, and everything is kind of very ordinary about him, I think. She, on the other hand, seemed to grow brighter the more attention she received. I think this is a typical introvert-extrovert marriage situation going on here, but with almost no understanding for the other person in that scenario.
Yes.
And so I think it's easy to see how tension started building between them. He wanted peace and routine and comfort, and she wanted excitement and the social circle and admiration. He was careful with money. She spent it as soon as they had it. They shared a house, but not much else. By the early 1900s, the cracks were starting to show. Belle's friends adored her, but sometimes even they found her exhausting. She could be jealous and controlling and prone to exaggeration, this kind of overdramatic person. And Crippen in turn became more withdrawn. There were rumors of infidelity too. Some of her friends later said that she flirted constantly, though whether that ever went further is absolutely impossible to know. What is certain is that by 1908, their marriage was mostly a very polite performance. Around the same time, Crippen hired a new secretary at Munyon's, a young Englishwoman named Ethel Le Neve. Ethel Clara Neve was born on 22nd of January 1883 in West London, the daughter of George and Charlotte Neve. I wonder why she started to call herself Le Neve. This is fancy.
I do too.
Her father was a postal worker and the family was solidly lower middle class. She had a conventional upbringing for the time, domestic, practical, not wealthy, but also not deprived. She was one of several children, and by all accounts, the Neves were steady church-going people who valued hard work and mostly kept to themselves. Ethel left school in her mid-teens, as most girls did, and went to work. And by her early 20s, she'd found employment as a typist and secretary, which was one of the few respectable office jobs open to women in Edwardian England. She was very efficient, discreet, and very punctual, which are, of course, all the qualities employers valued and still value in someone who handled their letters and bookkeeping.
That's right. So in 1900, she was hired by Munyon's Homeopathic Remedies, where Dr. Crippen was working as manager of the London office. She would have been around 17, and he was nearly 40. Quickly, she became one of his most trusted employees, and likely saw more of him during the week than his wife did. Sometime around 1908 or 1909, their working relationship turned into something more. We don't know who made the first move, but whatever the case, their affair began quietly. She was 26, he was in his late 40s. She later said she thought of him as, quote, the kindest man she'd ever known. What's interesting is how completely opposite she was to Belle Elmore. Where Belle was loud, dramatic, and social, Ethel was restrained and careful. She avoided attention, preferred simple clothes, and didn't socialize much. To outsiders, she probably seemed meek. So, they started an affair. And it looks as if Belle knew. She probably did. She wasn't stupid. Their home, once lively with parties, became tense and silent. Financial problems added fuel to the fire. Munyon's business in London was shrinking, and Crippen's income dropped. Belle's singing career hadn't brought in much. They began renting out rooms to lodgers in order to make ends meet. Yet in public, they still looked perfectly respectable. That was the Edwardian way. You smiled, you dressed well, and you never admitted anything was wrong. Belle continued to perform occasionally, often for charity events, and she became the honorary treasurer of the Music Hall Ladies' Guild, a position that gave her status, even if it didn't pay. She loved that role. It kept her connected to the stage and to people who admired her. The guild itself was a fascinating little world, a network of actresses, dancers, and singers who supported each other with small pensions and charity work. They were glamorous, independent, and outspoken. Of course, that's not exactly the kind of company most Edwardian wives were expected to keep, but Belle thrived among them. She had confidence, the gossip, and the jewelry to match. It's easy to cast Belle Elmore as loud or vain or difficult, because that's how she was portrayed after her death. The newspapers loved the idea of a brash, unfaithful wife and a meek husband who finally snapped. But in reality, she was a woman of her time, ambitious, trapped, and trying to reinvent herself in a world that offered very few ways for women to succeed on their own. She wanted fame and freedom, but she married a man who valued stability and silence. He needed calm, she needed applause. It's hard to imagine a more mismatched pair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially because it seems like he didn't... You do see pairs like this all the time, because they're content to not be in this spotlight. They want to watch their other person shine, but that's not what's happening here.
I mean, I did read that he kind of hired her singing instructors and tried to be supportive in the beginning, but I think he just grew tired of it. I just think it's not his world, and I think that's fine, that's fair, but
it got old after a while.
Yeah, I think they were just really a bad match. Yeah. So in 1905, they had moved into a house at 39 Hilldrop Crescent in Holloway, North London, which was not the most glamorous part of town, but, respectable enough. The area was full of tidy red brick terraces built a few decades earlier, each one almost identical to the next. 3 stories, narrow front garden, iron railings, and a polished brass door knocker. You know what it reminds me of when I looked at the photos? The house that Robert Coombe and his brother murdered their mother where they grew up. Mm-hmm. These kind of houses, like red brick, middle-class Victorian Edwardian houses, yeah.
That's right.
Crippen paid about £39 a year in rent, which doesn't sound like much today until you do the math, and apparently that's roughly £5,000 to £6,000 a year today, or around 450 to 500 in modern terms. Obviously, that's still nothing compared to what you would pay rent nowadays in the area. Mm. But yeah, he was a man on a modest salary, and it was a bit of a stretch, but it was still manageable if they were careful with money. It was this kind of rent that kept you in a respectable neighborhood, but also you were kind of constantly anxious that nothing out of the ordinary would cause financial strain. Inside, the house again was very ordinary for its time. Small entry hall, front parlor for guests, a dining room, a narrow staircase leading up to 2 bedrooms, and there was speculation that this was one of the reasons why they had chosen this house, 2 separate bedrooms. Either they slept separated for a long time already, or it was because they rented out one of the rooms. You hear both of these kind of stories. Then there was the kitchen that sat in the back, and below that a coal cellar. Very typical. The coal cellar dark, damp, usually ignored except by whoever had the misfortune to haul the coal up for the fires. Holloway itself was very quiet, lower middle class neighborhood. It had been farmland just a generation earlier, but was now solidly urban, with trams clattering by and corner shops on every street. There were clerks and shopkeepers and minor professionals who lived there. Not fashionable, but it was a very safe neighborhood, the kind of place, very unremarkable, but respectable. By 1909, their lives had become a balancing act of politeness, frustration, and I suppose mutual disappointment. Crippen found comfort with Ethel. Belle found comfort in her social life and her friends, and her fantasy of being someone famous, important, admired. On the evening of January 31st, 1910, Belle Elmore hosted a small get-together at the house on Hilldrop Crescent. That much is certain. Her guests were her close friends from the Music Hall Ladies Guild, Kate Williams, better known as Vulcana, the strong woman, her partner William Hadley Roberts, who performed as Atlas, and then another singer, Clara Martinetti. They were her inner circle, people who'd known her for years and who genuinely liked her. So these were real friends. They had drinks, they talked, they laughed a little bit. Nothing was really unusual about it. They had met this way many times before. According to police records, this was the last night anyone saw Belle alive. That's the factual part. Now, what happened during that evening depends on who's telling the story. Because some of her friends later told reporters that Belle seemed irritable, that there was a strange tension in the house. Others, like Clara Martinetti, remembered her unusually quiet, almost withdrawn, and not her usual loud, cheerful self. So what we know is simply a few friends came for dinner, stayed late, said goodnight to Belle at the door, and that's where the facts end. And after that night, she was never seen again. Belle was, poof, gone. And at first, no one panicked. Performers often went on tours, or they took impulsive trips, or they disappeared for a few weeks to nurse a broken heart or a hangover or some disappointment. This felt different though, because Belle wasn't the quiet, secretive type. She loved an audience, and she would have never left London without telling all of her friends about it first. So when her friends called Dr. Crippen, he told them she'd gone to America to visit relatives. He said, maybe her family in Brooklyn. Who can say? And the story made sense for about 5 seconds, until someone pointed out that she hadn't mentioned the trip to anyone beforehand. She hadn't packed properly, and she hadn't sent a single letter to anyone. A few weeks later, Crippen revised the story. Belle had, in fact, decided to stay in America, he said. Then, not long after, he told them she'd fallen ill there. And finally, that she had died. Quietly and very conveniently in California, from pneumonia. He spoke softly when he said it, and his eyes watered at the right moments, and it sounded believable enough. At least at first.
But even polite Edwardian friends have limits, and Belle's circle was full of sharp women who could spot a lie faster than most detectives. They remembered that Belle hated boats, that she always talked about money and gossip, but never about homesickness. None of them believed she'd simply gone home and died without sending a single note. Meanwhile, the doctor's behavior had become stranger. Within weeks of her disappearance, he began selling her clothes and jewelry. One of her friends later recalled being offered Belle's furs. Others noted he seemed oddly relaxed, more talkative than before, as though the tension that had filled the house had evaporated overnight. And then, of course, there was Ethel Le Neve. By early spring, she was living at Hilldrop Crescent, openly sharing the house with Crippen. The neighbors were told she was his relative. Belle's friends were told she was his housekeeper. But they couldn't miss the fact that Ethel was wearing Belle's jewelry, the same brooches and pendants Belle had once shown off proudly at parties. Even her clothes began to reappear. Slightly altered, yes, but still unmistakably Belle's. This was just absolutely bizarre. The whole situation made less sense the more people tried to rationalize it. If Belle had truly died in America, why had no one seen a death notice? Why had Crippen produced no letters, no telegrams, no obituary, no note of the funeral? Why was her husband acting as though she'd never existed? He, of course, tried to smooth it all over. In March of 1910, he invited some of Belle's old friends to dinner, perhaps hoping to quiet their doubts. But Belle's friends were not polite society. They were actresses and acrobats, women who'd built their lives by refusing to shut up. And the more they thought about it, the more they realized how many little details just didn't fit. By June 1910, speculation had turned into open suspicion. The members of the Music Hall Ladies' Guild discussed it amongst themselves, half horrified, half determined. They decided to confront him directly. They visited the house and again asked, "Where was Belle?" Crippen smiled his polite little smile and repeated the same story. America, illness, tragedy, death, very sad. The ladies left, unconvinced. A few days later, those same women went to Scotland Yard. And this fact, that a handful of stubborn performers refused to accept the stories they were being told, changed everything. And I think this is probably the perfect time to stop for this week. So, you'll need to come back next week to hear the rest of this story.
Yes, you have to.
Johanna's going to need at least that much time to edit all of my coughing and snuffling out of this. My God, girl, I am sorry.
There's a lot more to talk about when it comes to this case.
So much to talk about. Wow.
Do you have something good?
I'm trying to think of something. Do you have anything good?
My something good is kind of loosely related. I just kind of got into the Gilded Age. I know I already mentioned it, but I finished. I finished the most recent episode, which is the season final of season 3.
Oh, I'm a whole season behind you.
And now I'm so upset because now I'm like, now I have to wait a whole year for this show and
I know.
What's happening. And
it's so good.
It's so good. Oh, it's so good.
I can't wait.
I don't know. I kind of got into Downton Abbey back when it started, but then after a couple of seasons, I stopped watching it. I don't even remember why. There was nothing that kind of I didn't like about it. I just stopped. And then I was like, Gilded Age. You know, I'm not so much into Cynthia Nixon, and always when I see her, I just have to think of Miranda. But she's so good in this. Like, wow.
She is.
Great. All of them are great.
Everybody.
The costumes and the houses and the set design.
I know.
I love all of it.
I love Newport. It's really pretty, too, at Christmas. Like, all those mansions are done up at Christmas, like, beautifully. And you can visit them.
It's crazy how rich these people were.
Do you know? Okay, so there's another show that I can recommend that can be my something good. Do you watch Loot?
Do you watch what?
Loot.
No.
Okay, so it's a half-hour show, and it is... Oh my God, I'm going to blank on her name, and I love her so much. Maya Rudolph and Adam Scott.
Okay.
And they play... Adam Scott plays kind of like one of these tech billionaire guys. Like pick the one. Pick any that have been in the news in the last couple years, right? And he gets divorced, and his wife gets billions in the divorce. And then the premise is that she actually has a foundation and she's starting to try to give away all of her money. But it's hilarious. There was an episode the other day when we were in England. I don't know if it was the cough medicine, but they're in England and they're doing a whole thing about, I almost wet my pants. I was laughing so hard. They're making fun of British tea and they're like talking about all the sandwiches. I got to see if there's a clip, but it's hilarious. And it's really sweet. It's a half-hour show. And every season, I feel like it just keeps getting better and better and better. And it's just silly and light. But so my brain I'm a catastrophizer, as you all know. And so one of the things that I started doing a long time ago when I was trying to sleep and catastrophizing is, okay, let's stop thinking about all the worst things that have or could happen. And like, what if we won Powerball tomorrow? Like, what would you do? What would you spend it on? How would you help? You know what I mean? And like, let's think about that instead. And it's such a nicer way to fall asleep than imagining plane crashes and car accidents for all the people you love, right? And when Paul and I went to, arguably, I think we can all agree, Paul and I went to the Winchester Mansion years and years ago. I need to do an episode on that, actually. But one of the things that I was so struck with was how she was this amazing employer, basically. but just demanded real loyalty. But like, if you did work for her, like, she built homes for you and your family on her property. Like, she was so over the top. And I like to imagine, like, how much good you could do with that kind of money.
Yeah.
Giving it all away. How fun would that be?
I mean, who needs all these billions?
Nobody.
Like,
nobody.
Realistically.
No, we joke all the time. There should just be an award. Congratulations, you won. And then everything over $1 billion is just taxed 100%.
You mean like a YouTube plaque?
Yeah, like a YouTube. Congratulations, you won life. You did it. Now, everything else is just going to go to food banks and, you know. I mean, there's just no reason for anybody to be hungry or unhoused in this world that we all live in. It's bananas. But that's a whole other subject for a different podcast entirely.
Yeah.
So 2 shows about money, The Gilded Age and Loot. Enjoy.
Perfect.
Yeah. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to rate, review, follow Fresh Hell wherever you are listening, like, subscribe, mention us when people are like, hey, I'm looking for something new. Or if you know someone who has long commutes or spends a lot of time in the garden or vacuuming, like, do you clean? Do you clean for a living? Do you have headphones on all the time for any reason? Like, yes, put us in your ear holes. You're going to learn something, which is more than you can say for like a lot of other stuff out there.
That's true. That's true. I do it like, I don't listen to our podcast, obviously, but whenever I walk in the woods, whenever I clean, whenever I do gardening, I'm at the gym doing like strength, I listen to audiobooks and other podcasts.
Yep.
Not true crime, funnily enough, but a lot of other stuff.
I have a real hard time with the imposter syndrome.
Yeah. I worry that I pick up things and then use it in our podcast subconsciously.
Exactly.
And yeah, I can't do that.
No, me neither.
Also, I need to kind of be more lighthearted in my entertainment lately.
Yes.
Anyway, you can also leave comments on Spotify or under YouTube episodes. Wherever you are, wherever you comment, we do love hearing from you. We love hearing your thoughts and also your theories. Keep them coming, please. Especially under the Spotify episodes, we always get really good comments with some theories and background info, things we didn't know or didn't mention. I love it.
Every time I'm in for my infusions, that's all I do is I poke through Spotify and I try to respond, and YouTube, and I try to look for comments to respond to. So much fun. If you want early access, ad-free content, bonus episodes, our Cinema Macabre series, where we break a 60-minute television episode down for you in approximately 120 minutes.
It's so true.
You know, join us and get into it. It's fun. It's patreon.com/Fresh Hell Podcast.
Also, come hang out with us in our Facebook group or send us a message at freshhellpodcast@gmail.com. And as always, you can find all the infos on our website, freshhellpodcast.com. And that's it for this week. Please tell your pets we said hi, hug them, cuddle them, treat them nicely, take them to the vet, put them under the blanket. Or if you're in the southern hemisphere, don't put them under the blanket because it's getting warmer. Be kind to them. Be kind to your fellow human being, and also please, once in a while, be kind to yourself. You also deserve it.
That's right. Don't forget to love the unloved. And as Churchill once said, if you're going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
Bye.
People were confused that you said keep going last time.
I got confused that I said it last time.